In the year 680, a corrupt ruler named Yazid assumed control of the Islamic Empire. He immediately demanded absolute allegiance from Husayn ibn Ali under the direct threat of assassination. Husayn was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, and Yazid's demand presented a severe ideological crisis. Pledging loyalty to a ruler known for tyranny and bloodshed would place a seal of approval on his regime, effectively erasing the ethical foundations of justice and peace his grandfather had established. To avoid sparking a violent clash in his home city of Medina, a sanctuary where bloodshed was forbidden, Husayn gathered his family and set out for Mecca. But facing continued threats from Yazid's assassins, he was forced to keep moving. By refusing the oath and stepping into the open, Husayn forced the empire to reveal its true nature. His departure served as a deliberate, calculated stand to expose corruption and defend the rights of the oppressed on a much larger stage. The Umayyad military dispatched a commander named Hor with 1,000 troops to intercept Husayn's caravan. They actively blocked the family from seeking shelter in Kufa or returning to the safety of Medina, pushing them further into isolation. On the second day of the month of Muharram, the soldiers forced the caravan to halt and set up camp on an arid, sun-baked plain. They called this place Karbala. Stripped of allies, walled in by the desert, and facing an overwhelming military force, Husayn and his followers had reached the point of no return. Husayn's camp consisted of just 72 companions and their families, surrounded by a mobilized force of 30,000 Umayyad soldiers. To force a surrender, the army drew a physical blockade line to sever the camp's access to the nearby Euphrates River. For 3 days, under temperatures soaring to 55 degrees Celsius or 130 degrees Fahrenheit, the camp endured total dehydration. The women and children suffered acutely as their traditional leather water skins dried up completely. Denying water to civilians served as a calculated method of psychological torture. The empire engineered this suffering specifically to weaponize the pain of innocence and break Husayn's spirit. On the eve of the battle, Husayn gathered his companions. He explained that the enemy only wanted his life, extinguished the camp's lamps, and explicitly gave his men permission to escape into the darkness. When the lights were relit, no one had moved. They wept, swearing they would rather be killed than abandon him. Their loyalty was rooted entirely in spiritual devotion, completely eclipsing their desire for survival. The next morning, combat commenced. Knowing the massive disparity in numbers meant certain death, Husayn's inner circle stepped onto the battlefield one by one, turning battlefield casualties into a systematic, willing sacrifice. The losses cut deeply into Husayn's own bloodline. His half-brother, Abbas, attempted a desperate raid through the enemy lines to retrieve water for the children. He was surrounded and martyred, his arms severed by the opposing forces. With every family member and loyal friend who fell, the contrast sharpened. The empire exposed its willingness to butcher the prophet's own family to maintain its grip on power. As the battle neared its end, Husayn carried his 6-month-old infant, Ali Asghar, out to the enemy lines. He pleaded for just a few drops of water for the dying child. The Umayyad army responded with an archer. A targeted, 3-pronged arrow struck the infant, killing him instantly while he rested directly in his father's arms. The deliberate assassination of a parched infant stripped away any remaining political cover. The empire proved beyond a doubt that it was fighting a war of absolute brutality, devoid of any legal or moral justification. By late afternoon, Husayn stood entirely alone. Severely wounded, bleeding, and stripped of all defenders, he drew his sword and made a solitary, fearless charge into the thousands of opposing troops. He finally collapsed onto the burning sand. In his last moments before being beheaded, he lowered his head into a final prayer, offering absolute submission to God. By choosing death over a forced pledge of loyalty, Husayn drew a permanent line between his grandfather's teachings and Yazid's violence. He made it impossible for the tyrant to claim religious legitimacy, ensuring the faith's identity remained independent of the state's corruption. The battlefield massacre transitioned immediately into a brutal aftermath. The Umayyad soldiers looted the dead, set the family's tents on fire, and placed the surviving women and children into chains. The captives were forced into an agonizing march. Dragged from the blood-stained sands of Iraq, they walked all the way to Yazid's opulent seat of power in Damascus. There, Husayn's sister, Sayyida Zaynab, stood in chains before Yazid's court. She delivered a fearless, devastating public sermon that exposed his crimes and shattered his narrative of a victorious conquest. Husayn's refusal to submit on the battlefield and Zaynab's refusal to stay silent in the palace ensured the message of the caravan survived the massacre. While the Umayyad dynasty has long since vanished, the memory of this stand continues to draw millions to this shrine every year as a living symbol of resistance.